What'd you get? Wow. Wow. Suck ass.
Mr. Rasney, can you hear us? It is that classroom down.
Can you all hear me and Beckley?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Can I hear you?
Apparently not.
Anybody there in Beckley? Okay, can you, somebody say something so I can see if I can hear you all?
We can hear you, but you can't hear us.
No, the volume's low or something.
Probably photo.
I am a little bit.
Yeah, try it again. I turned the volume up.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, that's better. It's still not playing, but I want to make sure you can hear.
We can hear you fine.
So they can hear you.
You can't hear
How
us
many
at
people
all.
are in the room? 4?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello? Currently in E34 right now. The way talking, it's like he can. I'm not sure if they can hear us.
I should have had my first class yesterday, but you can still get in at this room.
Email.
The 25th is Wednesday, wasn't it?
If you want in it, we'll get you in it.
Alright.
What I was supposed to bring to you last session, and this is our homework for today. Are you taking that? Or
I'm gonna take it at the
You can
end.
hear him. It's just like the way he was talking.
Alright, good.
It was as if he could hear us. I wasn't so sure.
Yeah, that's all I need right there. I don't need nothing too in depth yet. I mean, we may get a little more in depth, but I want everybody used to it started first. Brought you one. Where is Clay Ayers? Absolutely. I'm sorry. I apologize.
It was as if maybe it decided to kick in or something. I don't know. It's done it before.
Gotcha. Is that last week? Give me last week's and you keep this week's till the end of class. All right, thank you. Yeah, it's miserable. Miserable.
Yeah, it wasn't raining at my house when I left.
Okay, so basically, the next class is going to be most meetings and the last day, basically the rest of the days, we're going to hear the issues by the end. Okay.
I left my, no, I got my phone. What did I do with that?
So you can't leave home.
Well, I thought I left it in the office, but I didn't. We got a couple more minutes for we start.
Think about, I zoomed him in on you guys, so if you like need to get his attention or whatever, just pull like your arms or something or whatever. And then Amy's got to come to the office, so if like something happens, call him, I'll call him.
I spent 3 hours.
But I think you guys on.
I was tired. I hadn't had a nap.
Was
It was
that
hard.
hard?
Not really. It's just I was so sleepy.
Like the day after all the classes.
And I have to know every detail. I don't just like scroll through.
Don't know when it's finished though.
I enjoy doing it.
It's complicated.
You have trouble finding anything? When you look at the cases, you have any trouble?
Sorry. Yeah, I swear.
You ever hear anything from you about up at the airport?
No.
You found them?
Yes.
You better stop by and see Mama.
Ground chicken, over a month sometimes.
That, I thought that last time I'd be trouble. Still just 4 people in Beckley?
Yeah,
Maybe it's heavy.
Tell me who we got in Beckley.
Clayton, Brett,
Yeah, hold on a minute, so I
Julia,
can
and
hear.
Jamie.
Hold on a minute so I can hear the folks in Beckley. I gotta take roll down there.
Clayton, Brett, Julia, and Jamie.
Somebody in back help me. What'd he say? Try it again.
Clayton, Brett,
Clayton, got
Julia.
that one.
Brett,
Brett.
Brent. Yes, no, maybe so.
All right, who else?
Julia,
Julia. Got her. All right,
Jamie,
Garbled up.
all right, thank you. Still missing. I have approved some more folks and the weather's improving, so everybody's finally getting here. I've got one more student I still am looking for, but I think we got everybody here but that one, and there's a couple there, so we're in pretty good shape. Oh, sir. I got,
Turn the volume up in here, or you're gonna get trapped.
well, all I get's gurgle, yeah.
So I thought like, with, snow schedule,
No.
haven't gotten my service cut for 400.
Well, we'll just do the best we can. Hopefully. All right, Beckley, did you all copy that? You all are gonna be able to hear me fine. It may be a little more difficult if you all communicate with me. I like to have some feedback, but until they can get it repaired, y'all may, have to just kind of watch things today and listen, okay?
yeah.
Sir. So to start with, there's some of you here that haven't been to class with me before. Wanted to make sure that you all know that you did miss a homework assignment. If you want to, you can get with me. If you want to get with some of the other students in the class who did that homework assignment, there won't be any deduction for anything late. We will get it turned in. I understand the weather's been crazy and we've had a lot going on. So if you just get it turned in, we'll move on. I won't do any deductions. Same thing there in Beckley. And you've actually had 2 homework assignments. The other one is due today, and it was 4 court cases that we're going to discuss, and we're going to try to tie this all in. And we're going to wrap it up on Thursday and hopefully take a test on the material that we've covered so far. And then we're going to jump into the next 2-week session, which is going to be technology and policing. Question? Shooting for Thursday this week, so we can begin Tuesday. Yeah.
Let me try something. Beckley, I thought I heard you all just a minute ago. Somebody, talk to me in Beckley.
Hello?
It's gurgle. You can hear them, but it's gurgle.
We can barely hear you here, and you are badly distorted. We think we've got an amp out. So if you didn't want to interrupt him and try to talk to him, try it, and then I'll leave it to the instructor to decide whether he wants to pursue it any further than that.
We'll drag through it, Beckley. They're gonna get it straightened out, but we'll get through it. Those of you in Beckley who sent me your homework assignments, I graded them and sent them back to you. Miss Adams should have them to hand back to you, or at least to tell you what the grade is if you don't want it printed back off. If you would do that with your homework assignments again today after we get through talking about them, I would greatly appreciate that. So, yes.
Do you have anybody like that takes pictures that I could take a picture of like the first day?
Yeah, we've got several people in here. We've got Mr. Lee and Miss Riffle and Miss No. We've got several people that'll help you out with that. And please take advantage. Any of you all who missed, please take advantage of our folks in here who were here and get the notes from them and make sure you're caught up. If you absolutely cannot, before we take the test, make arrangements to get with me, to meet me in the office and sit down and let's go over this material. We do not want you, these chapter tests are not going to be very long, probably, like 20, 25 questions, but I don't want you to fall behind on the first one. We don't want to make a bad grade on the first one. Spend the rest of the semester trying to dig out, right? We want to make a good grade on the first one so we can kind of be on pilot and move along. I don't want to see anybody fall behind. By all means, if anybody's not grasping what we're throwing out and what we're talking in here in class and you're not catching the material, please catch me. I will make every opportunity available for you. We will discuss it. I'll stay with you until you get it. It's my job as the instructor here to make sure that you all catch this material and you're ready to move out into your professional careers prepared. It's not my job to trick you. It's not my job to keep you, messed up. It's not my job to see if I can let you hit a stumbling block. It's my job to make sure that you're prepared. Now, having said that, before we get into this, and I told my operations class this last week, and I may or may not have told you all, I just want to drop this to you. I got pigeonholed a little bit with the whole student services. I kind of got tricked up. I had in my mind that student services were for students who were struggling, for students who weren't necessarily making the best grades, who were students who might be in danger of failing. And after sitting down and talking with that wonderful lady down in student services, and right now her name escapes me, y'all forgive me. I have a lot of names that faces I'm trying to remember, and I can't remember hers. But anyway, after having talked with her a little bit, I came to realize that student services are for everybody. Student services will go over whatever you need to go over. They'll help you with whatever you need help with. They'll tutor you in whatever you need tutoring. If you want to take a paper to them and say, look, I don't have anybody to proofread this paper. Look at it before I submit it. They're happy to do that. They're happy to help you with that. They will help you with the smallest project. They'll help you with the biggest project. And they not only do they work with the struggling students, but they also work with your better students. They can work with a B student and help them be an A student. They can work with a C student and make them a BA student. One of the things that she told me that really, really hit home, BA. One of the things that she told me that really, really hit home, of the last 6 years, 4 of the valedictorians at Bluefield State have been member of the student services. They go seek student services. So they have had a hand in 4 of the last 6 valedictorians to graduate from Bluefield State, which tells me that you have a lot of quality students going down there and getting help. So do not be shy to go down there and ask for the help if you need it.
Are you talking about Carolyn Kirby?
That's her, yes, Miss Kirby. Wonderful lady. They will help you. They don't turn anybody away. Even if you're not eligible under their criteria, they have some other programs that they can put you in and get you some help. They do not turn anybody away. They take care of everybody. Her funding was for, I don't know how she does it, but her funding was not for near as many students as she helped last year. She just does an amazing job. So by all means, if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you need a little help, a little support, do not hesitate to go see those folks down there. They will help you. Now, having said that, let's talk about some court cases. Court case number 1 was, get back to my right notes here. Court case number 1 was Graham versus Connor. I'd like for somebody to tell me about the case of Graham versus Connor. Somebody tell me what the setup is here. What was the question of law? Any volunteers? Don't everybody be shy. All right, go ahead. I like it.
What was in question? What was in question was the objective reasonableness standards, if they should apply to a civilian's claim the police use excessive force while making arrest, Terry stop, or other seizure.
Okay, let's break that down a little bit, because that was a whole lot of information in one statement right there, okay? So what was the question before the court was, read the first sentence and let's talk about it.
Decision to determine that objective reasonableness standards.
All right, that's where I wanted to be. The court has to decide what is a reasonable standard for
The excessive force while making arrest, Terry stop, or other seizure.
for justification or the appearance of excessive force on a regular stop, police stop, or a Terry stop. And remember, we talked about a Terry stop being what?
Investigation.
And a Terry stop is absolutely an investigative stop. As we talked about first day of class. Remember that? Terry stop being an investigative stop. You with me? All right. So, that's the question before the court. They have to decide the reasonableness of what would be considered excessive force under a regular stop or a Terry stop. So give us, somebody else in the room, give us a quick synopsis of what happened in this case. What did the police do and what did Garner do?
All right, so Mr. Graham was.
Or Graham, I'm sorry.
That,
I said Garner, but it's Graham, I'm sorry.
no, Dave's experiencing blood sugar was low, so he requested that his friend, Mr. Berry, drive him to the convenience store to get some orange juice to correct the problem.
Right.
When he got there, he went in, noticed that there was a lot of patrons in there, it was very busy, he didn't feel like waiting, so he ran right back out. He asked Mr. Berry to drive him to a friend's house. Berry apparently agreed, so they basically arrived at the convenience store, he ran in, almost immediately ran right back out, got back in the vehicle and left. Excuse me. Officer Connor witnessed this and thought that it was activity was a little suspicious, so he performed a traffic stop about half a mile away.
Okay. Hold on right there.
Right.
So the setup is, guy walks into a convenience store, he turns around and immediately comes right back out, gets in the vehicle. He makes no purchase, he engages no one, he goes in, changes his mind, comes out, gets in the vehicle, drives away. Now they're in the middle of a medical emergency. The police officer has no idea this medical emergency is happening. All he sees is somebody go into the store, turn around, come right back out. He says that based on his professional experience, this behavior is what?
Suspicious.
Suspicious. So it sounds like we're going to have what kind of stop?
Terry stop.
A Terry stop.
The traffic stop was conducted. Upon approach to the vehicle, Berry informed Officer Connor that Mr. Graham was having issues with his blood sugar.
Right.
However, Officer Connor elected to hold him there until he could figure out what happened at the convenience store. While Officer Connor was in his vehicle requesting backup, Mr. Graham exited the vehicle, ran around twice, and sat down on the curb. When backup arrived, they made contact with Mr. Graham, at which point he told him he was having an issue with his blood sugar. And basically, the officers did not take him to the hospital in his medical aid. They come to him on safe instead of putting him in the back of the police car.
There's a lot of questions to be raised.
And when they realized that nothing had actually happened at the convenience store, they drove him home. Again, it never mentioned having any intervention into his medical emergency whatsoever.
All right. So you have an officer here who pulls the car over. He's doing a Terry stop. Something suspicious is going on. He's trying to get a handle on it. He's made aware that you have a medical emergency. His blood sugar is going crazy. We've got to get him some orange juice. We've got to get him something to get him stabilized. Now, any of you have any medical training in here? Anybody got any medical background? Just one? You can't answer. Let everybody else answer this one. This is me and you know the answer. What happens when somebody starts having diabetic issues, when their sugar gets out of kilter? What happens to that person?
They act like a drunk.
Say again? They could faint, but there is something a little more common. Huh?
They go into a seizure?
They can if it gets bad enough, but there's usually something that happens that's a little more common before those two things.
Their erratic behavior.
Their behavior gets erratic, that's right. They begin, one of the many symptoms is they may begin to act like they're drunk. when you encounter somebody who's having a diabetic issue, they appear to be drunk. And they may very well have decreased motor skills, slurred speech, bloodshot eyes, glassy eyes, all of those symptoms like they're inebriated. Now there's something else that goes along with that. Sometimes they become aggressive and belligerent. They can't control it. It's happening automatically. I had my father-in-law, nicest guy ever. Never, ever, ever said a bad word. I mean, you couldn't get him to say a cuss word. He just didn't do it. But when he became hypoglycemic and that sugar dropped, he would have made a sailor blush. And then when he came back to, when you would give him orange juice or sugar or whatever it was and kind of get him stabilized, he had no recollection of using that language or saying those things. So what you have with somebody who has a diabetic issue is you have an altered state of awareness that's going on, which would describe why he got out and run around the vehicle twice and sit on the curb. To us, that makes absolutely no sense and seems quite aggressive. To him, the body needed to do something, and he could not control his impulses at that point because the sugar level just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping, right? And so the police officers, feeling threatened, they cuff him for their safety, and they put him head first in the back of a police car, probably because at this point he's saying, I've done nothing wrong, all I'm doing, my sugar is out of kilter, I need help.
It
And so they
actually
put him
stated that he
head
told
cuffed.
them to get in his wallet and look for his diabetic card,
There you go.
and they never did.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that it reported that he lost consciousness when he sat on the curb.
Okay. And that may very well, again, that may very well be one of the things. But that is also more commonly one of the things you see with people who are inebriated or who are drunk. The difference is you have to train your nose. One of the things that a diabetic will always give off in large volumes when they are having a hypoglycemic attack or whatever they got going on is a very loud, fruity smell coming from their breath or person. It's very fruity. It's very citrusy kind of smell. When you smell that, you need to ask, are you a diabetic? Are you having problems? That's always a giveaway. And usually it's very loud. Now, will you tell me?
Kind of like the smell of insulin. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's very fruity, like it's on their breath. But kind of like that, yeah. And if it gets so bad and they're sweating, like during the summertime, it's coming out of their pores. You can walk on and smell it.
If you ever smell one, you'll never forget.
Yeah,
Well,
you'll
my
never forget.
cousin, he's a really, really bad diabetic, and I'm just trying to think of that smell in my mind.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Anyways.
Tell me what the court said and who, first of all, tell me what their decision was and tell me the majority of the country. Can you do that?
Was it reasonable?
Yeah, was it reasonable or was it not? What did the court say, you know?
No.
All right,
It was reasonable.
yes. Somebody tell me. Tell me what the court said, what the majority's opinion was.
They went by a 4-point scale or something like that on reasonableness, and they did find that it was reasonable, given the behavior of the gentleman. And basically, they did remand it back to the district court. I can't remember what the reason was though.
Anybody else got anything?
There was one thing in there that they did remand back to the court.
It said that it was not a violation of the 8th Amendment, but it may in fact have had something to do with the 4th Amendment, so it wasn't granted.
Absolutely, for the Fourth Amendment. What needed to happen in that situation in order for that situation to have turned out differently? What needed to happen?
You would have to have been arrested, placed under arrest. Like that would have.
Yeah, it would have probably been a violation had he been placed under arrest. And there's a question of that. But what, as from a police officer standard, whenever somebody makes a medical complaint to you, even if you put them in cuffs, even if you don't arrest them, what is something that needs to happen?
Medical services.
Call for
Medical
paramedics.
services. Medical services. You need to summon medical services and have them checked out.
So why
He
was
could have
his
very well
complaint
lied.
about the Fourth Amendment versus them not getting him medical services?
The establishment there was, according to the Supreme Court, it's it's held that, a Terry stop falls under the 14th Amendment versus the 4th. And they were saying that what they did to him did not quite meet the threshold, according to the 14th Amendment, of violating his civil rights, his liberties. However, they were saying, they remanded back to the court saying, pay attention here, this could very well be a 4th Amendment violation, depending, right? So out of that came the new way that I talked to you about, the Graham scale of how we're going to use force and how we judge that use of force. Remember we talked about the Graham scale here the other day? What was it I told you about the Graham scale? Equal force with resistance. And what's the court required to do? What lens are they supposed to look through?
Police officers.
Right, they have to look through the same lens that the police officer looked through at that time. Right?
I have a question.
All right?
So if, let's say, if Graham had not been injured at all throughout the intercourse that he had with the police officers, would there still have been a violation for him? Or do you think his injuries had a lot to do with the reasonableness?
I think his injury had a lot to do with the reasonableness. However, I think there still may have been a case, because at some point, what I start thinking about now is the young man who was put in the paddy wagon in Baltimore. At some point, he asked for medical attention, as did Mr. Graham, and the medical attention was refused. And we know that there was a medical emergency in both cases. So now you have a deprivation of liberty that could cause injury, right? In the paddy wagon in Baltimore, obviously it caused injury, it caused death.
Well, that's my question. That one resulted in injury as well, but does the presence of a causation of injury actually be the same as the caused injury?
And again, that's going to be something for the court to decide, but we are required as law enforcement officers, when we know of a medical emergency, regardless of whether they're a suspect, a citizen, a bystander, we're required to get them that medical attention. And once we put the cuffs on him and deny him his freedom of movement, he becomes our responsibility to make sure that no harm comes to him, right? That's one of the things that officers a lot of times don't get. When you place somebody under arrest, you're now responsible for that person until you get them turned over to the jail. You're responsible to see that they do not get hurt. For example, you arrest somebody, you put them in the back of your cruiser, you're on your way to the magistrate's office to jail, and before you get there, you get T-boned at an intersection. The wreck hurts you, it kills the arrestee. You were responsible for that arrestee's safety until you got him to the jail. You become liable for that. Now, there's going to be some civil things that go on in there, right? And they're going to have to determine fault. But you could be in some trouble because of that accident. Say you were speeding and you had that accident.
If you were at fault.
If you were at fault.
But if you weren't,
Yeah, but it's still, I mean, the water's still a little muddy.
Yeah.
Water's still a little
Because
muddy.
you were still.
Because you're still responsible for that other human, right?
Right.
You
And
should've
so,
done all measures.
I'm coming to you. And so, what I say is, you know, much like Mr. Gray in Baltimore and this gentleman both asking for medical attention, I think they've got a legitimate claim. Now, here's where the officers in Baltimore have got an argument in court, and I can't wait to see how this works out. Mr. Gray kept telling them, I need medical attention, I need medical attention, I need medical attention. And they said, what's wrong? What is wrong with you? What is your injury? What has happened? And he would not articulate to them where he was hurting, what had happened, why he needed medical attention. He just kept saying, I need a doctor, I need a doctor, I need a doctor. Well, any of you all who have ever been in law enforcement, and those of you who are going into law enforcement know, everybody you place under arrest needs a doctor. All of them. Because they think that's going to keep them from going to jail. The first thing they do is, oh, I'm sick, I need to see a doctor. Well, what's wrong with you? I don't know, but I'm sick. They do it all the time. And so one of the things that police officers do is ask them to articulate what's the problem, what happened to you, so that they can tell the medical staff what their complaint is. Well, Mr. Gray never articulated He just kept saying over and over and over, I need a doctor, I need a doctor, I need a doctor. Well, it sounds a lot like, I'm just trying not to go to jail, right? Because that's what that police officer's hearing. Because he did not articulate what was wrong. And that's the question in court right now of the officers who put Mr. Gray in the paddy wagon. Not that they didn't do right, or not that they didn't violate policy, but the question is, yes, he asked for medical attention. Yes, we denied it because he could not articulate what was wrong. And that's the question before that court right now. I'm interested to see how they rule and what happens. In this case, he articulated what was wrong and requested medical attention. I think these officers were probably in trouble. Make sense? Your question, sir.
When you arrest someone, are you required to put them in the seatbelt?
If you put them in the back seat, not necessarily. I always do, or I always tried to. One, it kept them from, now you gotta understand, now back in the day, all I had in my back, across my back seat was cage. I did not have the plexiglass like a lot of them do today. And if you ever want to feel bad, you handcuff somebody, put them on the passenger side of the car, and about halfway to jail, you hear, because you know what's coming, right down the back of your neck. Touch you. You charge him with assault, but you can't touch him. And so I always put them in the passenger side, handcuffed behind them, and put the seatbelt on so they couldn't lean up and spit, throw any, blow their nose, any of that stuff through the cage. And you shake your head, it happens a lot.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Happens a lot. And the problem with putting a seatbelt on a person in a car is you have to be well trained in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because there's a specific way to do that so that you don't injure him and you don't allow him to injure you while you're doing it. And a lot of people don't want to have to deal with putting that seatbelt on that person, one, because they stink, or two, because they may be obese and there's not much room. You have several reasons as to why they may not want to put the seatbelt on them, but it's a good idea to, yes.
I have a question. Is it still required that, I know when I was younger, when I first got my learners, that anybody that was over the age of 18, if they were in the back seat, they didn't have to wear a seatbelt.
It's my understanding that's still the law. Backseat passengers do not have to wear a seatbelt.
I was just wondering, because
Yeah.
with that situation.
Well, but what happens is a lot of times what you have to understand is once you put the handcuffs on somebody and you put them in the back seat, it really impedes their ability to balance themselves, right? And if you'd have to stop suddenly or make a sudden turn or whatever, they may not be able to control and be jostled about in the back seat. So you might go over and above.
Yeah.
All right, next case, Tennessee versus Garner. I like Tennessee versus Garner. It's old. It's old school. Somebody else tell me about the question of law that happened in Tennessee versus Garner. All right.
Police officer shot a 15-year-old in the back of the head because the boy was running and was jumping over a 6-foot fence, and a police officer was convinced that he would escape if he
All right.
did not do something at that moment. So he
Fleeing
just shot him.
felon, right? He committed a felony. He was running. And the police officer thinks he's going to get away, so he shoots him, kills him. Question of law is, can you shoot a fleeing felon? Now, before we get into this case any deeper, a couple of things that you all need to know. And I'm the last one who needs to be preaching because you all can see me and I'm not in very good shape. It is important as a police officer, as a member of the criminal justice group that you're going to be, keep yourself in reasonable physical shape. Do not let yourself get out of hand. Because I'm telling you, every year you have a birthday, but the suspects are always 18. And they can always run. And it becomes very difficult when you let your body go and you don't stay in some semblance of good health to be able to apprehend these suspects and do the things that you need to do from a physical standpoint if you let your body go. Sit-ups, push-ups, running, all of those are extremely important. Extremely important. Because I'm telling you right now, when you're on the bottom of the pile and you're fighting for your very life and you run out of air 45 seconds into a 3-man fight, you're in trouble. You are in trouble. All right. So somebody tell me about what actually happened in Tennessee versus Garner. Tell me about why they shot this young man who was running away. Tell me about it.
All right, so, yeah, Officer Hyman, case, were dispatched for a report of basically a burglary. So when they arrived, Officer Hyman went around to the back of the residence and witnessed an individual running across the yard after hearing a door slam. He basically got the light of his flashlight onto the individual. The individual looked at the officer and then proceeded to scale a 6-foot fence. Having done so, Officer Hyman exercised his discretion and fired upon the individual to affect his capture, basically, making sure he wouldn't continue to flee, citing the possibility of being able to do further harm to either he or the other individuals in the community. However, at the time, Tennessee statute and department policy stated that he was in the right of having done so. So, the question of morality is raised for the officer. However, we did follow the statute.
That's if there's, from what I understood, that was if there was a threat to the public safety, but what I read was, which I may have gotten my source from somewhere else, was that the officer admitted that he recognized that the boy was unarmed. The boy was using both hands to scale the fence, and he was in basketball shorts or some loose clothing that it would be hard to hide a gun in.
Right.
So if the officer admits that and knows that he's no real threat to public safety, how can this be justified?
Well, and I agree with you on that until I found the actual statute as it was stated. And it said, quote, if after notice of the intention of arrest the defendant, he either flee or forcibly arrest, the officer may use all the necessary means to effect the arrest.
So
That's what made him run.
what come into question is that's a state law, okay? That's a state law. And then that, the way you read it?
Yes.
That statute said that that's a state law. And what happens in this case is they're challenging the constitutionality of that state law. Okay? Just because the legislature passes a bill and the governor signs it into law and everybody starts abiding by it, doesn't necessarily make that law constitutional. And the constitutionality of that law was brought into question over this case. Is it excessive or unreasonable to use all force necessary or any means necessary to effect this arrest on a young man who's simply trying to evade arrest, who poses no specific threat to the community or to the officer or to anybody there? That's the question before the court. What is reasonable for a fleeing felon?
What is it federally? I mean, wouldn't they take that and say, well,
Well, at that time, before Tennessee versus Garner, which was in 1980 something, there wasn't a standard.
oh, okay, I see.
So they're challenging these state laws to create this federal standard, right? And so now, here's the conundrum that the officer finds themselves in. They followed policy. They followed state law. But the question comes in, was state law what it was supposed to be? Was it constitutional? Right? So who can tell me what the court found out?
Supreme Court affirmed.
Okay, the Supreme Court affirmed what? Tell me about the majority opinion.
The Supreme Court affirmed, I just had that they affirmed the findings of the district court,
What was the finding of the district court?
that the officer was correct.
And poses no threat.
Says that you may not use force to shoot a fleeing felon when the fleeing felon poses no threat
To the public or officer.
to the public or
So
the
they
officer.
said the officer was right?
Wrong.
Okay,
Well,
I thought I heard that he was
Yeah.
I mean,
wrong,
not.
That's what I thought he said.
They said the officer was right in having followed the state law.
but he was wrong because
And so
he
we're
just
gonna,
shouldn't, it was excessive.
right, we're gonna dig into this a little bit more. We're gonna dig into this a little bit more. So, what happens in this case is twofold. The first thing is because the law existed and the policy existed, and the officer followed the law and the policy, he's covered from civil liability. He's covered from criminal prosecution, right? So in that, he's correct. They can't come back and get him for those. However, the police department now opens himself up to liability because their policy was wrong. The state law was viewed unconstitutional. So the department may be on the hook for this young man's death, but not the officer.
How was the department on the hook when it was the state that allowed this policy to go into effect? They were just following what the state did.
When you write policy like that, basically what happens is you can't sue the state as an entire, but you can sue an entity of the state, like the state police, or like the police department. But if you get mad at the Commonwealth of Virginia, or you get mad at West Virginia, you can't sue the state of West Virginia. It can't be done.
I thought you could.
I didn't know that either.
No, you cannot sue a state. You can't sue the federal government, but you can sue an entity thereof.
So could you sue the governor of the state? Not
Yes.
the state itself?
Yeah, but you'd have to sue him personally.
Could
You couldn't sue him as the governor.
personally For passing,
No,
Law
for
got
signing a
smacked.
law for that?
No.
Like that, okay.
So then
That's-
how-
So the only person to go after in that case is the police
Would
department.
be
That's
the
right.
police
That's-
department.
right.
That seems like a flaw.
Correct.
Well, that's
How-
ultimately, the government says they're not going to be liable for what happens. So anyway, the new standard is this. There has to be a obvious danger to the police officer, to anybody at the scene, or if you can prove that this person is a danger to society if he gets away, you can then use lethal force, as much force as necessary to make the stop. Is it difficult to prove that this person would be dangerous to society if they got away? Yeah. Why? Because he's a teenage boy, he's unarmed, he's wearing loose clothing, and he's committed a nonviolent crime, right? All of those things in their totality, as you look at this, leads you to believe that he's probably not going to be a violent risk if he evades this arrest. We'll get him in a day or two after we get the fingerprints back. Right? So that's the standard that we have to operate under moving forward from Tennessee versus Garner. Now, the other point that I try to make is that you as law enforcement officers, you as future law enforcement officers, have to know and understand that the law and your expectations change all the time. Stay abreast of the current changes as you work. All right, next case, Scott versus Harris. I want somebody new to tell me about Scott versus Harris. Help me out. All right, tell me about it.
Mr. Harris is speeding. Officer Scott goes to pull him over and he runs.
Okay, wait a minute. Does he run these cars? Does he run on foot?
He's in his car.
Okay.
He flees in his car. High-speed pursuit ensues. And Officer Scott rams the vehicle and gives a stop. The vehicle crashes and Mr. Harris is rendered a quadriplegic.
Okay. All right, so here's the situation. A traffic stop. Flip on the blue lights, subject runs. Officer pursues. You had your hand up a minute ago and I forgot. What was the question?
So would he be justified to use the taser instead of his gun?
Absolutely. A taser would be considered something acceptable in that situation. Yes.
I was thinking too, maybe if you hadn't shot him in the head, more like the leg.
You can't do that.
Well,
Yeah.
and also that is.
Yeah, I mean, he shot him in the head.
Why you
Well,
not shooting him in the leg?
You can't ever do, that's not the way you're trained.
Yeah, you don't train to just
I just
shoot
didn't know how the
somebody
law
in the
would,
leg.
if it would change the law.
Yeah, it probably would have still changed the law, but what goes against the training, against every
anybody
police
with a
officer's
weapon.
training is you're taught to shoot center mass.
Yeah, that's anybody with a weapon.
Yeah.
I just took that concealed class. That's anybody. You don't shoot somebody to
Yeah,
hurt them.
There is no shoot to wound, you shoot
Yeah,
to stop the
you
threat.
do not shoot
Right,
to
right.
hurt somebody. You shoot to
If
kill
I
them.
don't want to know, that's the only thing I remember.
What's that, shoot to
Of
stop
you
the
telling
threat?
me that, yeah. 'Cause that's the question I asked, I forget, last semester. I was like, well, you don't have to kill him, just,
Yeah, I remember you asking that question, now that you
You don't
mention it,
pull a
yeah.
gun on somebody
No.
unless you're willing to kill him.
Right, And the
Because
situation, the threat
that
has to
one
be
shot,
provable so that you can justify using that force. It has to be a threat. But yes, to answer your question, I'm sorry it took me a minute to get back to you. I just remembered you had your hand up. But to get back to you, yes, a taser would have been appropriate. But back in 1980, whenever that was done, tasers wasn't even a thought back then. You either had a baton, your pistol, that was it. And most of the time they were revolvers. They weren't even automatics. All right, so officer chases this car down after a traffic stop. The officer decides he's going to do what we in police term as a pit maneuver, right? Pit maneuver, and we are going to send the car into a controlled skid. This goes wrong. Officer doesn't perform the pit maneuver correctly. Skid goes out of control. Gentleman ends up as a quadriplegic. All right. He sues. What's the question under law?
Was he right in using that force to?
Did he use excessive force by trying to wreck someone or using the pit maneuver on a fleeing traffic stop?
My one question, did anybody find out how exactly it went wrong? What was, like,
Just the
what
way he
exactly
hit him.
he did?
I think I read it said he rammed into the back of him or something like that.
No, what he did to get pulled over to start with.
He
No, I'm talking about what the officer did that made him wreck or made it go completely
Pit
back.
maneuver.
Well,
He
kind of,
just-
Probably just hit the back wheel to one.
let me read to you what I wrote, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, well, go ahead.
Alright, so basically, his intent was to perform a pit maneuver. Start. My understanding, a pit maneuver is a force of action that can spin out a fleeing vehicle and is executed by utilizing an advance and sweep movement. So essentially, the police vehicle would advance to either side of the fleeing vehicle, proceeding at a distance covering only a foot or two past the back of the vehicle. Upon which time the police vehicle would make an exaggerated turn towards the direction of the fleeing vehicle, causing the back end of the fleeing vehicle to begin to move perpendicular to the direction of traffic. Distorting the forward control movement of the fleeing vehicle, creating an environment conductive that of a spin out of the vehicle itself. However, and quoted here, Scott applied his push bumper to the rear of Harrison's vehicle. So instead of advancing to the side, he just pretty much ran them.
Okay, all right, that's all.
Instead of hitting him in the side of
Right.
the vehicle,
He
he hit him in
just
the back.
ran.
But here's the bigger question. Here's the bigger question that we as police officers have to ask ourselves. What are we willing to do to catch a guy who ran a stop sign? Come on now, because that's all we know, right? What are we willing to do to catch a guy who made an illegal U-turn? Because that's all we know for a fact when we flip on his blue lights and he runs, right? That's all we know for a fact. What force is too much force to stop somebody who may have not had their driver's license and are maybe suspended and they don't want to get pulled over, so they run? How much force is too much force to stop that person? Because when you perform a pit maneuver, not only do you put yourself and the suspect at risk, you put everybody else on that highway at risk. The most dangerous weapon you as a police officer will possess in your career, and you will use it every day, is your vehicle.
So like, what if they would have did? I think I just played the game too much. But what if they would have what's one of them thingies where they put on the road and it's
Spike strips.
Yeah. What if they would have did? That wouldn't have been too much.
It would
force,
just
would it?
depend
It
on.
probably
It's
wouldn't
still
have been
causing
too much force, but there again, you really have to evaluate how much traffic's on the road, how much are we able to control traffic and get it out of the way? Can we get the spike strips out in time to get him and not endanger anybody else? I mean, there's so many questions. All right, so now, here's the question. How much force can we use to stop somebody when all the information we have is they may have committed a traffic infraction, right? Which after all we've talked about is probably going to be some type of civil penalty, not a criminal action.
Let me ask this, before you go ahead. It does say before the pit maneuver that they almost had him stopped in a parking lot.
Right.
He fled, having struck Deputy Scott in the process.
Okay, now that changes things a little bit. What happens with that? Was deputy in the vehicle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens with that?
Assault on a police officer.
Yeah.
It goes even beyond assault, but now it becomes felony. What is it? Attempted capital murder of a police officer. Correct. So now you have a little bit more to work with. You have a little bit more of a case that you can work with. But in the beginning, what did they have? Just a traffic stop. So, you know, that may be one of those mitigating
And that's the
circumstances.
thing too, he wasn't even the starting officer in the beginning.
Right.
He's
just the one who wrecked him.
I know this is going a little deeper into that, but
I like it. Let's go.
how is that considered attempted capital murder on a police officer if that wasn't your intention and there was no chance of him getting killed by brush?
You don't know what may happen. I've seen people die with damage on their vehicle that looked like they bumped fenders in a parking lot and the person died.
I just thought, I thought or said
With
that.
vehicle, you don't have to prove intent, is what I'm getting at.
Oh, okay, intent, that's what I was.
Yeah, with a vehicle, you don't necessarily have to prove intent.
Okay.
Okay? Had a situation in Taffeta County not too long ago where subject was drunk, he was running. It's been maybe 3 years ago. Subject was drunk, he was running, he was on 460 going westbound. They put a cruiser catty-cornered across a cutover so that he wouldn't cut over. The officer flipped on his blue lights, turned on his park lights, exited the vehicle, and was standing back at the back end of the vehicle to make sure he didn't cross over in that crossover. The guy was so drunk that he started driving toward the blue lights. And he drove into and T-boned that truck right dead center at the blue lights. They charged him with attempted capital murder because the officer was standing at the back of his vehicle. Completely destroyed the vehicle. So you don't have to prove intent when you're inside of a vehicle like that. Now, should the officer have done what they've done? I don't know. They didn't want him to turn around on 460 and start back the other way. But I'm not sure that blue lights for a fleeing intoxicated person, that's kind of like that blue light for a bug, you know, when they're flying. You know, it's kind of what it does. All right.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Absolutely.
Could they still have charged him with that even if that officer had completely left the area of his vehicle?
No.
Due to the possibility and the unknown, the drunk had no idea if there's someone in that vehicle or not, but it's possible that he was.
It's possible, but no, because it would be a stretch because the officer wasn't in the vehicle, wasn't in the proximity. It would be a stretch.
Criminal didn't know that.
Right, but it would still be a stretch. Still be a stretch. In fact, they ended up lowering the charge on this individual because the officer was out of his vehicle standing behind it. They ended up dropping it from attempted capital murder to, I don't know. It had something to do with assault maybe. But they
Yeah, I was
dropped
gonna
it
say,
down.
if they went from
They dropped
capital
it way
murder
down.
to just reckless driving, that was just,
Yeah, I think they dropped it down to some
Very
assault charges, so they couldn't even make the capital murder stick with him standing at the back of the car. But they didn't charge him with it.
To me, I could have articulated that saying, well, maybe the drunk saw him standing there and knew he
Tried to
was-
swerve, yeah. I mean,
so.
again, intent's a hard thing with a vehicle. Intent's very hard with a vehicle.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. You don't have to necessarily, like, for example, you are drunk driving and 3 of your buddies is in the back seat and you all wreck, even if it's not your fault, you wreck and 2 of your buddies in the back seat die, you are guilty of 2 counts of vehicular homicide, no intent necessary.
You were driving.
Just because you were driving, right? So,
anybody who gets in your vehicle for any reason, you are automatically responsible for it.
you become, yeah,
If
especially
somebody
if
commits
you
a
impose
felony
yourself.
and gets in your vehicle, you are a part of that felony.
Especially if you impair yourself in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So, let's talk about we talked about the question of law, we talked about what happened. Let's talk about what the judges said about the case. Somebody let me know.
They reversed the decision,
What was the lower court's decision?
that the officer was at fault
The
He
lower
used
court
excessive
said the officer was at fault
and that he used excessive force.
and that he used excessive force. What does the Supreme Court say?
Found that the officer was in the right after looking at the dash cam video.
After looking at the dash cam video, the Supreme Court said that the officer did not use too much force. Is that what they said?
Exactly.
Based on the set of circumstances. And what was the majority opinion? How did they justify saying that he did not use too much force? Anybody know?
Fleeing in a vehicle at high speeds is a risk to the public.
Okay. The fact that the defendant was fleeing at high speed, putting the other people at risk, The officer had no opportunity or no knowledge of when he might slow down or when he might stop that fleeing, so he's trying to end the chase to make it a safer place on the highway, so that justifies that, right? It's good. So what happens is there has to be that element of danger to the public, and that justified the officer's actions. Great.
So would that make sense to say that, anytime somebody commits a traffic infraction and you chase them and they run, that you have everything at your disposal to take them down, because they are presenting a risk every time that they go more than.
They are presenting a risk every time that they run. Each department is going to have different policies on, runners. They will have restrictions on fleeing vehicles that you will have to follow. So I'm not going to tell you that one shoe fits all feet, but I am going to tell you that the Supreme Court says that you do have a lot of leeway when a subject is running and creating that hazardous environment to the general public. But that leeway then becomes a little more restricted based on what your department may say they want you to do, right? They may evaluate that risk and give you some more restrictions on top of what the Supreme Court says that limit your ability to engage.
I also noticed in this case, some doubt was expressed earlier on in the review by the initial report indicated that there was no one else on the road. It was traveling on a wide open road that was not going to be any populace, so there was no immediate, present danger to the population. However, when they reviewed that video, that was not necessarily the case.
Right.
Because it said that he had gone around several vehicles. It was a 2-lane road. There was, a lot of curves.
Well, the defense, obviously in their first case, the defense did a good job arguing that he hadn't put anybody in danger because they just riding down a country road. Ain't nobody else out there, right? So the defense did a good job making their argument. Sounds like the prosecution needed to take a lesson from the defense, but they finally got it right when they went to the Supreme Court. Who else had their hand up?
Yeah, isn't speed a big factor in determining if they're at risk or not? I didn't see exactly how fast he was going, it just said high speed.
Well,
No, he was going,
erratic driving as well. If he was maneuvering around vehicles and stuff, that right there is a
It
danger.
said he was going like 73 and a 55.
Yeah.
2,000 pounds worth of
Speed's a
metal
factor.
at that speed can really hurt
Erratic
somebody.
I would use, instead of the word erratic driving, I would use the word aggressive driving. Your speed, aggressive driving, bumping another vehicle, running red lights, any of those kinds of things would all be factors that you would consider when you were going to engage him on how quickly you wanted to get that stopped.
Even if it was on a country road,
How much traffic's on the road?
one family minivan coming back from vacation,
Right.
he hits them at 73 miles an hour,
Oh, it's bad, yeah.
that could really get bad.
I have a friend in North Carolina who actually went through this. He was a Traverse City cop at the time. Now he's, I think, with North Carolina State. But he was chasing 5 teens in a car down a road that it was just a 2-lane road, late at night. They crashed, all of them died. So he had that on his head, but he went to court for it, and they found that he was in the right. Even though it was late at night, basically on a country road, they were headed into a town.
Right. It's about the appearance of creating a public threat, right?
Yeah.
All right, final one. Gallegos versus Colorado Springs. It's a Terry stop issue. Did y'all have trouble finding that one?
A little bit.
Initially.
There's
That
a
was
lot going on
crazy.
in Colorado Springs.
Yes, there is.
It was 3 Gallegoses.
Really?
Yeah.
It was actually
Well, I don't
3
know if I got the
people.
right one then.
Well, and maybe you didn't. I don't know. I didn't realize there were 3.
Yeah. There were
I got
3
the one
defendants in
about
it.
I got did
But
y'all
I
get
think
the
it was
right
only
one?
the one that the actual Supreme Court looked at.
Yeah, there should be only one in the Supreme Court, right?
Which one did y'all find? I found one about a guy that was making a disturbance or something like that, and he was drunk.
Got ran over.
Yeah, that's the one I got, yeah.
All right, tell us about it. First of all, tell us what the question of law is.
I think it was if the officers used too much force on the man.
And what way would they have used too much force?
Because he got in a stance. Kind of like a stance with his fist or something like that.
Right.
Like he was getting ready to attack the officers. It was I think it was a woman and a man.
I didn't find that one about a 14-year-old boy, like from 1962.
Yeah, I found one she did. Basically, officers were responding to two separate calls. One was a prowler, the other one was a man and woman that were apparently in the am I on the right, do I have the right case?
Mhm.
Okay, so, when the officers arrived in the area, they found a gentleman that closely, not perfectly, but closely matched the description of a man involved in a verbal altercation. So, when they approached him, he was distraught, crying, yelling at himself, had his hands over his face, walking erratically, so he was stumbling, and he smelt of alcohol. So when they approached, they asked what was going on. He didn't respond. So one of the sergeant that was there ended up actually, he got his arm and he jerked away. On the third time, they happened to be in the middle of the street. Turned around and assumed what they described as being a wrestling type stance, hands behind his waist. At which point the female officer, who apparently was performed an arm bar. The sergeant noticed that the suspect was in a position to strike the officer with his free hand. So he insisted with taking off the subject to the ground. Once he got him to the ground, they were trying to handcuff him again there in the middle of the street. They're oncoming traffic. One of the vehicles ended up striking Officer Santos and Mr. Gallego. Three of Officer Santos about 2 feet away from Mr. Gallego and over Mr. Gallego. So that was the facts.
And what's the question at law? Too much force or excessive force in trying to apprehend him, right? All right. So what does the court say? Anybody? Tell me what the court said. Mr. Lee?
All right, so the U.S. District Court ruled in favor of the motion that Gallegos had made. However, subsequently appealed this case to the U.S. Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals also held and accepted the motion for summary judgment on behalf of the officers, citing that because they had determined Mr. Gallegos was not arrested and was not deprived of his rights under the 4th and 14th Amendments, they need not address the issue of qualified immunity. So basically, they had not arrested the subject. They had tried to control him based upon his presentation of an offensive stance.
Right. And that was based on the grounds of officer safety, right?
Correct. The fact that they were in the middle of the street wasn't decided by them. It was decided, in my opinion, it was decided by Mr. Gallegos. That's where he decided to stop.
He chose his battleground, right?
That's one away from the officer.
Right. Yeah, he chose his battleground, right. So basically what the Supreme Court said was there was no violation for excessive use of force in that instance because he wasn't under arrest and because these officers were simply trying to control him for officer safety.
That's why it actually took me a minute to find this, because I don't think it's actually went to the Supreme Court. It goes to high court. That's why it took me some time.
The one that I found that actually went to the Supreme Court was about a 14-year-old boy.
We
arrested.
didn't want that. We wanted to run over. All right. So let's talk about what happens when you start talking about excessive force with police officers. What are some of the remedies that happen when you start talking about use of excessive force? Officer gets convicted or gets charged with excessive force. It's founded. What are some of the opportunities he has to have happened to him as a result of excessive force?
What do you mean?
What are some of the things that may happen to him? He's getting ready to go down a road. The court doesn't say, yes, we find that officer so-and-so used excessive force and we're going to award the victim $1 million. And then it's over. That's not where it ends. What else happens?
Well, his officer probably.
He may get suspended. He may get fired.
You might have a criminal.
He may get arrested.
Yeah.
What else?
Can he pay a fine?
Civil lawsuit.
Civil lawsuits. Let me read a couple of these to you. Excessive force lawsuit filed in a Fermilab shooting. A Carico teenager filed a federal lawsuit Tuesday alleging that West Chicago police officer used excessive force earlier in the month when he fired into a car filled with unarmed young people. You think he's got criminal charges coming?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Former police officer charged with using excessive force. March 15th, 2012, a 4-year veteran of the police department from Joliet Police Department was dismissed after allegedly using excessive force during a February 9th domestic battery call. On April the 9th, 2 counts of aggravated battery and 1 count of official misconduct was entered against Thomas B. O'Connor, 35, and he was released on $25,000 bail. Here's one. Judge dismisses indictment against Deputy Marshal. A federal judge on Tuesday dismissed criminal charges for excessive force against a Deputy U.S. Marshal, ruling the Justice Department officer had been overly aggressive and even threatened witnesses with prosecution. Stephen Linder and his attorney, conference room underground mock testimony in anticipation of taking witnesses to the stand in his trial next week when an email from the court announcing the decision landed in his lawyer's box. Even when you do things right, you can still be indicted. Most of the time it gets overturned, it gets thrown out, but you may very well still be looking at criminal charges. Los Angeles County Jail uses excessive force. September 28, 2012, Los Angeles County Jail have not done enough to reduce unwarranted use of force, such as deputies grabbing inmates by the throat, beating a handcuffed inmate. So the whole jail in this article is going to be sued. And those people who did that. Brown's chicken killer wins $451,000 in a civil rights lawsuit.
Chicken killer?
Getting there. I knew I'd get your attention. A federal jury awarded a man serving a life sentence in 1993 for a 1993 massacre of 7 workers at Brown's Chicken Restaurant in suburban Palatine near $500,000 in a civil rights lawsuit against a former Cook County jail guard accused of beating him in 2002. He told the Tribune the jury's decision in favor of James Jaskorsky, which was the defendant, and the victims of the family of the victims expressed outrage. Even a serial killer still has rights and cannot have excessive force used against them, and you will have to pay. Here's the one that I like the best. I want to get to this one. Universal Studios executive Brian Mulligan sued LAPD for excessive force. Former Universal Pictures chairman filed a lawsuit against LAPD to go to trial, bringing it before the jury. He claims he was harshly beaten by authorities as he visited the Eagle Rock Medical Marijuana Dispensary on the evening of May 25th. The testimony is expected to present 2 different stories about what happened in the evening. Mulligan told the judge, I used bath salts before I went, and I know that just isn't me, but the officer still had no right to beat me.
And he is Universal Studios.
President.
Bath salts.
Bath salts.
Bath
What does that have to do with getting
You
cheap?
could afford something better than bath salts.
Bath salts. Yeah. And for you all don't know it, and I've had very limited encounter with folks that are on the synthetic drugs that are out there right now. But for those of you all who are going to be dealing with them a lot, they are extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Bath salts cause the people to become very unpredictable. You cannot predict what's going to happen next.
Bath salt, like the new PCP?
Almost, yeah. It's like a poor man's PCP. Synthetic marijuana, the synthetic bath salts, all of them create an opportunity for the suspect to become very aggressive, and they have superhuman-like strength. It's unreal. My interaction with them has been fairly limited, but they are treacherous when you deal with them. So I've got 3 more court cases for you to take care of for me for Thursday. And I'm going to, we'll finish up Thursday with a short test, and then I'm gonna ask you to write just a small paper for me over the weekend. Yes?
What will the test be on these court cases that we've been?
Well, court cases and some of the first day's notes that I gave you all, just things like that.
Thursday.
Court cases, and the victims that we talked about, and use of force and the Fourth Amendment. All right. 3 more court cases. Russo versus Cincinnati. Russo, R-U-S-O, Russo versus Cincinnati. Martinez versus the New Mexico Department of Public Safety.
Martinez versus what?
The New Mexico Department of Public Safety, and basically that amounts to the New Mexico State Police or Highway Patrol. And Isom versus the town of Warren, Rhode Island. I-S-O-M, Isom.
Town of Rhode Island?
Yep, the town of Warren, Rhode Island. Yes?
ISOM.
I-S-O-M, Isom versus the town of Warren, Rhode Island. All right, Thursday, I'm gonna try to bring everything together. We'll finish up with the test, and we'll rock on.
So that test, will there be a lot of dates and names?
No, I don't do a lot of dates and names. I'm more in the general session.
This last question was sent.
Yeah, I want your homework. I want your homework.
But I'm gonna run, I just live right here in Green
I'm
Valley.
later.
I'm home and you want.
Just right.
Well, you did, I was thinking.
We get out of
Five, sometimes 5:30.
What y'all do,
Just write my email.
Just be in my class.
I'm not gonna do it
Yeah,
with
just be
you.
in women's classroom. You don't need to do all that. Just make sure you're in women's classroom. Thank you.
Where we always have sick
No,
people.
Ward actually does.
Yeah, we just.
No, I just, right now, we're just doing real simple. Yeah, no, you just,
We
I
do
just
sick
want it real simple, we're gonna build on it as the semester goes on.
We're not good enough.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, and tomorrow's gonna be even crazier. Because we got I decided to write to 1, and then be back over here at 4, so.
You like class so far?
Do you need to copy that? Read it.
Bye-bye.
Family should be able to. Oh, that's one. Apparently now we're gonna do Monday. Or. 4 questions because the syllabus, the text of the syllabus is all, the syllabus is what?
Well, that,
Yeah, I had a discussion with you.
you know, Saul Mitchie,
Yeah.
I think
basic
here,
science, he's 2 doors down from the bell.
I've had, this is the second time I've had him, I've never been.
He's not,
Main thing is I want you to look
It's not
at the case that you did.
not required. He's just quiet. You wouldn't think he's professor, he looks so old to me.
Yeah.
That way, I'm not absent, but at the same time,
Scoot
you're
up
home
this
from
time.
late.
Say again?
Where I was just last time.
You know, they sit in the back of the room.
Hell no.
I would think that you could. I wouldn't see any problem with it. But the person you're gonna need to talk to is,
So I'm gonna skip the 4 to 5
Dr.
part.
Ebro.
Leave here at 5, that puts me home at like. And they give me 15 minutes to change clothes.
Right.
Boom, I'm at the funeral
Right.
by 6.
After I done with the funeral, 2 hours,
They get me
my
like.
family is straight to liquor.
I would think you
Oh,
could
I
get into
started
that one and be fine.
ventilating.
I think you could get into the forensics class and be fine. It's Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
He said, it's tomorrow.
It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with a lab on
So,
Friday.
yeah.
It rotates every 3 weeks, or every 2 weeks, I'm sorry. I've got this week and next week.
Who's the other two?
Or they've got about 5. They do them 2 weeks at a time. I'm doing crime scene and fingerprints. Yeah, it's a good class, though. Well, at least my 2 weeks is gonna be. Thank you.
So that's only 2 weeks you do, out of the semester, 2 weeks?
No, yeah, out of that, yeah, 2 weeks.
Do they consider that a restricted liquor?
They should sign off on it, yeah. Yeah, that's why I told him Dr. Eberall would be the one that would sign off on it, but, there's no reason she wouldn't sign off on it. It's a good class, and it's gonna be challenging, fun.
I enjoy it. All right, Trevor, see you Thursday.
So, all right, see you Thursday. You have a what? Oh, okay. All right,